13 years old. And in her 13th year, in the summer of her 13th year, she learned this story, and she would do stand-up readings. She had hundreds of them. And I wish that I could do this just half as well as she could, because she could really make it come alive. And I hope I can bring some of it to light for you today. The name of it is The Major Story, and the author is anonymous. The rain was dripping down on the pavement, slimy with mud. The air was saturated in raw. The group of men in the club room took great delight in the roaring fire around which they had gathered. The talk drifted from one subject to another and finally touched upon the drama and innovation of several rising actresses. "Why is it, Major, you fly so shy of the theater?" asked Mr. Despard, a white-haired old gentleman who sat smoking a cigar. After a moment's deliberation, the Major replied, "I went to the theater a great deal when I was young. That is, until I saw some real acting. I've never been since." "Give us the story, Major." "My regiment was a part of the Army of the Potomac. We had moved from near Washington to Fortress Monroe in two divisions, one along the river, or James River, and one along the York River. About like this, only there was more thunder and warmth in the air. I was called to my colonel's tent. 'Lieutenant Vail, you're to take a squad of 10 men and go to the Devereaux mansion. We have reason to believe that a Confederate officer, a spy, has gotten through the lines and is hiding there. The house has been watched. A picket reports a man was seen to enter, was shot at, but got away. Search the house, arrest him, and bring him here. Be quick and don't fail.' I took my orders, saluted, and was gone. It was dusk when we left the camp and passed down the road toward the stately old mansion. I had enlisted from a New England town and had seen very little of the world, but I found in my heart a strong sympathy for the proud, high-bred Southern families. This particular house was a fine specimen and stood on the highest point of the Devereaux plantation, which had been the stately home of many generations of that name. As we drew near, we saw that the house was illuminated. The lights twinkled at us through the trees. For a moment, the remembrance of the great army of which I was a part faded from my mind. I fancied that I approached the house as its guest, that its great hospitable doors were thrown open to the gentlemen of the neighborhood, and I could almost hear the squeaking of the violin and detect the aroma of fragrant punch. However, as we drew rein at the door, this cloud of fancy covering the grim truth was dispelled, and I sickened at my task. The father and sons were perhaps dying on a faraway battlefield, while the wife and daughters kept their lonely vigil at home, and I stood for all they despised and abhorred. As I swung from my saddle, I vowed to show them that chivalry lived in the North as well as in the South. An old Negro came in response to my knock at the door. He was trembling, poor old fellow. I asked for Mr. Devereaux. "Master Devereaux, sir, he's gone off to the wall, sir." "Then I'd like to see your mistress." He opened the door a little wider, and I passed into the great hall, and after giving my men orders to surround the house, he left me standing there while he mounted the stair. He was gone so long that I became uneasy, especially as I heard hurried movements above. Then a step sounded on the stair, and I heard the rustle of a woman's dress. I looked up and saw coming toward me the grandest sight a man can ever see, a magnificently beautiful woman with a regal air and an eye that caught mine and held it. She was dressed like a queen in shimmering white satin. I might have thought her dress a little unusual for such a time, but I did not. That dress was appropriate for her at any time, under any circumstance. She stood before me with a proud look on her face. Her eyes held mine. I moved as to a sovereign, and upon my honor, I could not say a word. Then it occurred to me to show my orders, so I fumbled in my pocket and brought them out. She didn't look at them. "I know why you're here. I know why you've come. You've come to search the house. He is here. I'll take you to him. I looked at her in stupid wonder. She turned without speaking, and I followed up the broad stair along the hall to a room on the left. She opened the door softly and beckoned me to enter. It was a large, handsomely furnished room, dimly lighted by a candle with a shade on front. There was a large bed in one corner, shaded by a canopy of brocade. She approached this, and I saw there was a man lying there. She reached for his hand, clasped it in both of her own. Then turning, facing me superbly, unflinchingly. Here lies Captain Exworthy. Lies here dying. A Union bullet made a hole in his chest. Make him your prisoner if you will. God will release him soon. You think he came here as a spy. He came here as my lover and knew I was alone. And knew I was alone and knew I was unprotected. I say he was my lover. He is now my husband. We were married an hour ago. Since you're too late for the bridal, leave us to our honeymoon. I still get choked up. But anyway, she sank down by the bed and buried her face in its folds. My head swam. My eyes filled with tears. I bowed reverently and backed from the room. I had seen the agony of human heroism, and I stumbled along, hardly knowing what I did until I reached the door. Then I recollected myself. What was my duty, I wondered? The old Negro stumbled up to me. Mrs. Say, sir, used to stay to the room in the front. I was expected to remain. I told my men the condition of affairs and ordered them to the stable to sleep on the hay, relieving each other on picket duty. I then returned to the house and was escorted to my room. For an hour or more I sat there motionless, thrilled with the tragedy so near me. Then the door opened, and she stood there. Her eyes shone like stars, but she was as pale as death. It is over. You may see him. I followed her again. He was lying on the bed as before, the light dimly revealing him fully dressed in his Confederate uniform, his hand on his breast, clasping his sword. Ah, but he was a handsome man. We bury him tonight, leaving his sword. His shroud will be the Confederate flag. You do not object, I trust. Madam, there is no honor known to man that I would not grant your dead husband. After telling my men the condition of affairs, I went back to my room and sat motionless by the window all night. Toward morning, a cart was driven to the door. There were Negroes with torches, and I heard the measured tread of men who carried a burden reverently. A body wrapped in a Confederate flag was placed in the cart, and a stately muffled figure was helped in beside it, and sat there while the cart was driven away. The lights disappeared among the trees. The rattle of the cart died away in the distance, and all was still. Old Pompey handed me a note the next morning before we mounted and rode away. I won't tell you what it said. She simply thanked me. I made my report to the colonel, and would you believe it? I met that man and woman, Captain and Mrs. Exworthy, in Washington 2 years afterwards. I tell you, gentlemen, the women, Southern women are the greatest actresses when they're playing for the man they love.
Excellent.
Any other questions?